Усім вітання! Це подкаст «Коли все має значення». Я Ангеліна Карякіна, а зі мною, як завжди,
Наталка Гуменюк. Всім вітання!
Привіт, Наталю! Продовжуємо розширювати наші горизонти і говорити з людьми, які нам у цьому допомагають і інтелектуально, і культурно, завдяки твоїй широкій роботі на багатьох континентах. Сьогоднішня твоя розмова з Талі Нейтс, яка є засновницею Центру вивчення Голокосту та геноциду у Йоганнесбурзі, в Південній Африці. У нас була нагода свого часу послухати Талі під час воркшопу, який ми робили про меморіалізацію, де ми збирали людей з абсолютно різних куточків світу. Але все ж таки розкажи, на чому ти фокусувалася в цій розмові, і трошечки розкажи про біографію Талі, бо все-таки вона людина з особливою історією сімейною.
Талі є сама з родини вцілілих в Голокості. Її батько був саме врятований Оскаром Шиндлером. Вона історикиня, більше життя все-таки прожила в Південній Африці, і в Йоганнесбурзі її, я би назвала це все-таки, це центр Голокосту і геноциду, вивчення в Йоганнесбурзі, але насправді це є музеєм невеличким, таким, який, чесно скажу, є одним з якихось найцікавіших, найдоречніших музеїв про порушення прав людини, про воєнні злочини, про злочини минулого століття, де я б не була по всьому світі. Те, як він зроблений, те, як він облаштований. Ми познайомилися вперше, зумисно ми прийшли туди під час конференції, яка була в Йоганнесбурзі, разом з іншою колегою, південно-корейською активісткою, правозахисницею Ганною Сонг, яка створює в Сеулі свій музей, і ми прийшли до Талі разом знайомитися і розказувати, як зробити хороший музей. Я якраз перед цим, так це буде в самій розмові, побувала в кількох таких не дуже доречних музеях, там і Голокосту, і геноциду, які були дивнуватими, я би так сказала, якимось щось, таке було враження, що з ними щось не то. І от Таля розказувала всі свої секрети, але деякі речі мені просто засадничо страшенно сподобалися, коли вона казала: ми зумисно зробили музей світлим, тому що ми хочемо наполягти на тому, щоб світ розумів, що злочини кояться, про них знають. Вони не кояться в темноті, вони кояться при денному світлі, і довкола люди це знають. І нам треба це підтверджувати. Давайте не робити цей вигляд. І там кожна деталь якась, чи це якась шухлядка, чи якийсь екран, чи якесь особливе фото, в ньому було щось. Да? Вона могла розказати, ось чому в них такого кольору стіни зроблені з цегли, чому в них в кінці музею там дерева, наприклад, тому що геноцид в Руанді коївся, коли люди були посеред природи. Тобто там все було продумано, але окрім того, це якесь було місто світле, яке тебе, скажімо так, я не можу сказати, давай скажемо, не надихає, а тебе спонукає до дії. Воно тебе не прибиває, а навпаки, ти хочеш зробити таке. Я там мала змогу мати зустріч з медійниками і дослідниками з Південної Африки, шановане місце, колеги наші модерували. Цей музей, до речі, став таким великим знаковим місцем для України після повномасштабного вторгнення, тому що Талі приймала там і виставку про Голодомор, і певну частину якихось українських заходів і виставок. Востаннє там, коли приїжджав президент Зеленський до Африки, а перед цим нині вже прем'єр-міністерка Юлія Свериденко свою лекцію вона читала там, тому це така дружня вже для нас інституція. Але загально, я би сказала так, я поговорила з Талі про, умовно кажучи, як зробити правильний цей музей, порушень прав людини, якісь навіть поради, бо я думаю, що в нашому середовищі люди, які над цим думають, як зберігати цю пам'ять, як фінансувати, як будувати, як організовувати цей простір, що там має бути, що в ньому має бути ідеологічно. Окрім цього, є кілька речей, які я там загалом зачепила. Не можна було не зачепити загалом тему боротьби з апартеїдом в ПАР. У нас багато на це не було часу, але я радше питала, як фінансуються ці музеї і центри. Є дуже цікаві моделі від там якихось коштів від інституцій на кшталт казино, які дають свою данину і фінансують там музей апартеїду, тому що от вони мають щось робити корисне, якщо вони хочуть відкрити, наприклад, казино в Південній Африці. Тобто Талі давала давала поради, як вийти з ситуації, коли ти не можеш просто прийти і сказати, ми бідні, в нас нема грошей, давайте нічого не робити, хорошого. Як з цим давати раду? І, звісно, я її все ж таки запитала про ізраїльсько-палестинські відносини. І, власне, це питання, яке постало для дуже багатьох інституцій, які зберігають пам'ять про Голокост, про цю кризу, тому що їхній центр все-таки не уникає питання Гази. Воно проводить розмови, бо деякі хочуть закритися і казати, це непопулярне питання, там ми не хочемо, воно суперечливе. Вони все-таки, як дослідники Голокосту, працюють, зокрема, і тому що це таке середовище, і тому чинний момент в країні, яка так само є одним з, я говорю про Південну Африку, країні, яка веде доволі чітку позицію щодо притягнення Ізраїлю до відповідальності в міжнародних трибуналах щодо дії в Газі, і це політичний пріоритет для пар, то, звісно, мені було цікаво зрозуміти, як вони працюють в цьому контексті.
Ти знаєш, я переглядала свої нотатки після воркшопу, в якому і вона брала участь, і вона там якраз і пояснювала про те, що музей, тим більше з такою темою, це не просто консервація якихось подій в минулому, а зв'язок з сьогоденням, тим більше цей центр досліджує витоки ксенофобії, расизму, антисемітизму, і мені сподобалась там десь звучала фраза, я от зараз точно не скажу, чи вона була її, що мова іде не про якісь ідеї, якщо я правильно перефразовую, в минулому, а в тому числі і про дію у теперішньому, що ми сьогодні можемо робити. Тому надзвичайно цікаво буде послухати твою розмову з Талі Нейтс, засновницею, керівницею Центру вивчення Голокосту та геноциду в Йоганнесбурзі, Південна Африка. Давайте слухати.
Ми дуже дякуємо нашим слухачам, вам за ту підтримку, яку ви здійснюєте для цього подкасту, зокрема для роботи наших чудових колег, звукорежисерки Люби Гук і редакторки Іри Лопатіної. І на прохання ваше ми це зробили. Ми створили на сторінці лабораторії журналістики суспільного інтересу не просто сторіночку, де ви можете донатити за реквізитами, але й можливість робити одноразовий донат і регулярний донат. Довелося нам попрацювати над цим, але тепер це можливо. Знаю, що ці донати приходять. Це дуже-дуже нас підтримує. Знаємо, що в Україні багатьох потрібно підтримувати, але якщо є така змога, щоб ці розмови далі виходили, ми вам неймовірно вдячні. Це дуже надихає. Tali, good to see you and talk to you, and it's definitely not our first conversation, but what even more, I even have the chance to see you in person a few times, which is amazing. I bring the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center, usually an example of the museum which tells the story about grave human rights violations and the war crimes and the preservation of the memory, as the one which is kind of made in the way that it really saves the purpose. You really feel that everything is well thought there. And even I want to tell you something from the beginning. Johannesburg and South Africa is known for having this barbed wire everywhere. It's so classical. And there is one place which I saw in Johannesburg which was not surrounded by the barbed wire, because that would be probably strange for the Holocaust and Genocide Center. And I understood after meeting you that everything is well thought in your case. So my first question would be maybe briefly just to explain what your center is. We'll get to the details how it was built later. But before, for our audience to explain, what institutions do you represent?
I founded the center with the idea that we can learn from history. That is the bottom line. I am a historian. I am also a daughter of survivors of the Holocaust, but I work for many years around the world and mainly in Africa. So for me, it was very important to create a center that tells a multi-directional way of looking at history. We are a historical institution. We look at historical case studies before the word genocide was coined, because it was only coined in 1944, before there was laws about genocide, before there was crimes against humanity spoken about, before anything of that, but to understand that journey, that not everything is as you see it, learn from history, and then to learn mainly two case studies, even though we do many other case studies, including case studies from Ukraine. But the main two case studies that we're dealing with in the permanent exhibition that took many, many years, as you said, we thought about it very, very carefully, were the case studies of the Holocaust in Europe, but also in Africa and in other places. For example, we have the example in the exhibition of Mauritius and of South Africa and of North Africa and so on, but also of Rwanda, the genocide that targeted the Tutsi population in Rwanda in 1994. It is a place of education. It is a place of memory. But more important than that, we encourage people to look at history, to learn and make connections to their lives today. It doesn't have to be genocide. It can be atrocities. It can be personal journeys that they go of trauma and so on. Then the last very important point, I think, in this brief introduction is that we, from the start, decided as a NGO, non-political entity, historical entity, that it has to be a space of dialogue, a space where you invite people to debate, to talk, to exchange ideas, to explore through exhibitions, films, theater, conferences, dialogues like the one that we had with the media, for example, issues that are not always easy to speak about.
It would be quite a specific discussion because we became very interested on how exactly you preserve memory. And we understand there could be a lot of troubles. The memory can be politicized. The memory can be used and easily forgotten. And also, it's still very sensitive because what is special about your place, yes, it's about the Holocaust, but we're speaking about the context of the South Africa where, or like Rwanda was, let's say, still in the 90s. And all this, it's about the living memories. And I feel with the, museums and with the centers of the Holocaust that you sometimes can be either not less sensitive, or it's some of those institutions are just, for us, for the Ukrainians, we're not just, looking at the institutions and something we visit. We're also looking at them as a study case, how we would build the institution to remember Russian invasion. So if we come to the, big institutions in Berlin, in Washington, it's something which is very hard to comprehend. You just really know that it'll take decades to build something like that. It costs millions and zillions. And, yes, the greatest architects are involved. But sometimes, even if the greatest architects are involved, it's a beautiful structure. But there is something is uncomfortable or something puzzling. What makes your center special that, you just feel that everything is up to the point. It's not very big, but everything is well thought. So maybe I'll start really from the design. We'll speak about the memory later. Tell you the journey. How was it for you to build this kind of center? What you were thinking about, when you were building it? How to make a structure when you have the limited amount of money and it's not a huge state kind of a budget. What should be considered? What does it take to create such a place? Yeah.
Those journeys are journeys. When we spoke, I said to you, one of the best assets is patience. To sit with information, to really think deeply about how and why, and the big questions of why do you build it? Why do you build it here? How do you build it? Who is involved? Who are you speaking with? Are you listening to many, many voices? And that was very important for us. Also to think about, if I'm building it in South Africa, what is the South African story that I'm telling? Yes, I am using case studies of Armenia or of Namibia or Holocaust in Europe, maybe in North Africa. Yes, I'm talking about Mauritius. Yes, I'm speaking about Rwanda. But what are the connections to me? What is the connection to the visitor from South Africa that can see a mirror of themselves? That was so important as we were talking to people, as we were gathering information, photographs, music. We composed music that was local music with local composers, listening, for example, to survivors from Rwanda and survivors from the Holocaust, talking to each other, sharing stories, sharing their music, empowering each other, living in the trauma together. This is just one little example of how precise but patient was the process. We had to think about how do you make the connection between history and ourselves here in South Africa? How you tell the story in a multi-directional way, that you're not taking people in a linear sort of journey. Many times, as you said, when you go to huge museums that expect you to start in point A and finish in point Z. And we said, no, we want to give you an experience, a thought that you can go and experience a space in a non-linear place. So the process was interesting because the first thing to do in our process was to talk to groups, gather Holocaust survivors, gather Rwandan survivors, gather academics, gather teachers, gather students, and so on and so forth. And then ask them, how would you want the building to look like, first of all? So, for example, the Holocaust survivors said, we would love to see railway lines because that is the symbol for us. The Rwandan survivors said, we would like to see trees. We would like to see nature because that is what watched us, in a way, in inverted commas, as the trauma was unfolding. Teachers said, we would like to see ourselves. We are the teachers. How are we going to be there? And we had to find the way. The artists said, art is never in those museums. Music is never in those museums. We had to include that. So that was the first step. And then I think what you said that is really important is, how do you do things without much money, but still with integrity, still answering the philosophy and the questions that we are asking? And one of the things that we did was we invited people to become part of the community, part of this collective memory that we are building together. And I think I gave you the example of our lighting guy, the designer of the lights. His grandmother was a survivor of the Armenian experience, Christian Armenian, that was a survivor of that experience, of that massacres and genocide. We had people that came and said, no, Italy was part of the story. How does the Italian community get involved? And they gave us granite and they gave us other elements. Others came with wood and concrete and even the railway lines, real railway lines that was brought in from a scrapyard and said, please do use these railway lines from the mines that are not anymore in use to talk about mining industry, oppression, modernity in South Africa. So it was so interesting because it took time. It took 8 to 11 years to create the center. So nothing was quick, but we listened to everyone, we involved everyone, and in the end, the center was not very expensive because everyone brought almost their contribution to the story. And it became a common story of humanity, not of Tutsi or of Roma or of Jews or of Germans. It became a common story of humanity because in the end, atrocities are not coming from out of space. They are of human beings that are doing it with other human beings. And that was kind of where we got to.
My question would be why you have those two genocides. We understand why the Holocaust, but why just exactly Rwanda? I'm telling this story because it was very specific for me. I came to your place in Joburg after I've been in Mexico City, in the Museum of the Holocaust and Genocides. And there was a very long list of the genocides, let's say, presented there. The huge museum was more about the Holocaust. And then there was something which more was like an appendix about all the rest of the genocides. And there was Armenian, and there was the one in Srebrenica, and Guatemalan, obviously, because it's close to Mexico. But it was not clear why they selected those. why in the end Syria was there, why, for instance, there won't be Ukraine, why there won't be Gaza. It was very confusing for me to see. Of course, there was the one in Cambodia. And there was this question that, like, never again in Spanish, but it was very strange because it was exactly at the moment when we were speaking about the events in Gaza and everything which is happening in Ukraine. But for them, it's like the story ended up with Syria. And then I came to your place and there was this question mark, never again, question mark. And I understood how one question mark in this statement can change. And instead of me being puzzled, why not this, why not that? Why they say something is never again, but it's not exactly the case? There was this question. So I want to first you explain why Rwanda in particular, and why not something else? Why you're not adding up, all the other African crimes which has connected? Why, for instance, not Namibia? Because Namibia was, maybe we can consider it's the first case of the genocide, and Namibia was part of the South Africa. In speaking about the Nazi crimes where it's all started. So it could be all very relevant that the Nazis took it somewhere from Africa and brought it to Germany, and then everybody learned. So there are the questions, but you probably has given a thought about your limits.
First of all, the curatorial decision included certain philosophies. And one of the philosophies is exactly that never again with a question mark. Because perhaps Auschwitz will never be built again, but it does not mean that atrocities will not happen again. We know that, and you gave many examples. So we do know that atrocities will not duplicate themselves. They will not build or create S-21 in Cambodia, maybe again, but atrocities will happen again. So the one philosophy is to question that never again. The other philosophy that is really important that I briefly spoke about is that connection to ourselves. So connect to South Africa. And there Rwanda is extremely important because in April 1994, two countries in Africa, 3.5 hours flight away, 3,200 kilometers away from each other, same month, same year, same continent, decided on very, very different paths. One, our country, of course, after massive violence, massive loss of life, lots of suffering, decided to go to elections and to democracy. And of course, in April 1994, we elected Nelson Mandela as our first democratically elected president. The same month, same year, in Rwanda, already by the 27th of April, when everything started on the 6th and 7th of April, thousands and tens of thousands, and I would claim even more, were already killed in what we now know as a genocide. So for us, the connection to South Africa and understanding choices and understanding dilemmas in how governments, countries, people, communities can go very different ways was key, absolute key. Also, we are in Africa and we almost have to consider ourselves as looking at ourselves as a place where you can, I don't know how to say it, but interrogate African choices and African action. What is our role to see what is happening in Africa? You mentioned Darfur, but we can mention many other countries that are struggling at the moment. Elections, lack of democracy, arrest of people. Things are happening all around the continent. Can we as a continent find solutions, African solutions for African problems in a way? And that was also a thought when we chose Rwanda. I will also say one other thing. We have very limited space, and it was important for us to mention Namibia, but to tell it in a different way and to tell the story of the word genocide. And you remember that the way we curated the exhibition was to say there was no word, there was no law, there was nothing before 1944 and then 1948. And the events of the Second World War and the Holocaust, in a way, gave birth not only to the word, but also the international order that we have today Is it perfect? No, but it is the international order that we have today. The courts, a lot of what we see, NATO, many, many other things were born after the Second World War. So it was important for us to take these two case studies, but also to understand the road of the word genocide, the word of the law, crimes against humanity and genocide and atrocities in general. But then we had the honor actually to work with you and with others. We have a beautiful space on top where we call it the Hall of Light. And in that Hall of Light, which is a large space, we invite other exhibitions and other conversations. I think our conversation was there with the media, and that is, and actually we had also an excellent other exhibitions, and it can be about other 20th century events like the Holodomor, or like perhaps Cambodia or other events, and that we will host and we will discuss in depth. The last philosophy that I want to mention is really important. And maybe it will lead us to the other discussion about memory. One of the very important philosophies that we had is that I spoke about connections, even connections to today, that people can make connections to today. And the architects listened to us and they put, for example, windows, light in the permanent exhibition, but also in the temporary exhibition space, and actually in our offices and everywhere. There are big windows, and actually the exhibitions are in light. In other words, saying those atrocities are not hidden. They're not happening in the middle of the night. They're happening during the day. And today, of course, with the media, everything is there. Do we make that connections in ourselves to what is happening outside, not in darkness? Our philosophy is that our stories are told through arts, but through life and not the moment of death. A lot of museums are telling the story of atrocities through death. Where were you killed? What happened to you? Gas chambers, churches on fire, drones, whatever. It's the moment of death. We say it's happening to human beings. We have to remember them as human beings, and we have to remember that they are men, women, and children, and tell their story of life, and not only the moment of their death. That philosophy is very, very important to us as well.
You know, I like always the phrase, and it was from the founders of ESMA, the Argentinian museum and the memorial and the site which used to be the prison and, first of all, like the military base, the Nedi base, and then the place where people were tortured, and currently to be the State Museum. It was said that like the museum, the exhibition should be comfortable for the uncomfortable and uncomfortable for the comfortable, meaning that the people who it gives the comfort for those who are suffering, for those who lived through that, who return to that place, but also for those kind of who come, they really should understand what went there. My question to quite a lot of people, how you make it popular, especially to the audiences. And honestly, I have the limits of the sensitivity to the people, for instance, in my country who say like, we can't visit the museums of the war crimes. It's too much. We can't read the books about the war crimes. It's too much for us. I'm not speaking about the survivors. I'm not speaking about the people who really are vulnerable. But I'm speaking about, my colleagues, my kind of like of the same age, who, live in Kiev during the war. And I do believe they should understand, through what their fellow citizens went through. I was very sensitive to people who saying, and I remember this conversation forever when we went to Krakow with a number of the group of the Ukrainian civil society activists. And some of them told me, no, we won't go to Auschwitz. It's too much. I can't really do that. And I said like, how you can't? It's a history. You have to go to Auschwitz to see it at least once, I really don't get it. So maybe I'm like very categorical sound today in my permanent mood. I understand that's probably the reason. But I do think it's a part of the public education. And I do think these things should be told in a reasonable way, but for larger audiences. How you deal with that, how you get the groups. What is your trick, honestly, let's use this word, to make this place, both comfortable for those for whom it's difficult. but still, let and engage the people whom you believe should know about what happened. For instance, I'll have the question about Gaza, but at the same time, we're living through a different moment in which the understanding of Israel would be very different currently by youngsters who are like 15. And it would be good for them to go to the Holocaust Museum to understand. But you need to get them in. So how you attract people, how you make it that it's not somewhere on the outskirts of the town, boring place where kids are forced to go and they hate it.
You're asking such good questions. There is difference, of course, between ESMA, which was a place of torture. So it's the actual place, it's the cells, it is the place of suffering, or Auschwitz, or a place, I don't know, in Rwanda, you go to Nyamata. It's a church where 5,000 were butchered, inside with machetes and with pangas and hand grenades. When you go into these actual places, some people, they do feel confronted, or it's very difficult. It can be a little bit traumatic for some people, and I want to respect that. Our place is, of course, in the middle of town. It is on a very busy street in Johannesburg, opposite very fancy hotels in the middle of town. The architect team created a space that is welcoming. It's open. It doesn't have barbed wire, as you said in the beginning. It welcomes everyone. Actually, you can come in to a very big plaza with benches and with chairs and with tables. There's a beautiful coffee shop that serves not only the visitors in the museum, but people that are coming with dogs, that are runners, and they're coming with their bicycles at 7 o'clock in the morning. Because we believe that a place of education should be also an open place. As I said, a place for dialogue. Please come have a nice cup of Rwandan cappuccino. I think that you had some of those. Have the experience and then come and visit. The other thing that we thought was very, very important is the light, that you don't create a dark space, that you go into the abyss. You go into the experience. I do not need you. I had a really interesting conversation with a friend of mine in Japan a few days ago. And he said that in Japan, in Hiroshima and so on, they're thinking about using AI. And I saw an article about it to relive the experience of the atomic bomb. So you, Natalia, will put a VR or whatever, surround sound, and as if you are walking in the street of Hiroshima or Nagasaki, and the atomic bomb is happening to you, and you see, everything around you. And this is another discussion. Do we really need to put people through the experience of war, of genocide? Do you really need to take people to Gaza or to Kiev or to Donetsk? Or do you really need to do that? That is a discussion. Or can you create a space that is full of life, that tells stories of people, that rehumanize the people rather than take humanity completely out of them, and make it a game, make it I don't know how do you say it, but you go to a theme park, and you have to go and experience the Tower of Terror or something like that in like Disney experience. I forgot the name because I'm always very scared of those places. So I don't go and drop in the lift, to experience how a lift elevator is dropped. But maybe you are more adventurous than me. These are the debates of memory today. So the way we decided to do it, and I'll end with that because I think it works. We have a garden, a small garden. After you experience this journey to understand humanity, its darkest and its light, you have choices where to go. You can listen, you can watch movies, you can open drawers, you can open sort of pull-up drawers, you can read quotes. I mean, we are a museum that has poetry in it. And to some people, they love poetry. And they stand next to a short poem for a long time because they want to interact with humanity. We finish it in a little garden. It's a garden that you smell the flowers and you can sit on benches, you can listen to music, this music that is very reflective. It's on our website. You can go and listen to it. That is called Remember and you are encountering a very short phrase. It is actually a concentration camp survivor, a German concentration camp survivor that used to say the following words: "I have told you this story not to weaken you, but to strengthen you. The rest is up to you." And this is in Kinyarwanda, in Hebrew, in English, in many languages. And basically you see yourself in a mirror through this quote. "I have told you this story not to weaken you, but to strengthen you. The rest is up to you." And, yesterday we had actually an underprivileged school, under-resourced school from one of the townships. And in the end of the workshop, a 4 hours workshop, the kids came in line to shake the hands of the facilitators. We had about 6 or 8 facilitators that spoke in many languages as well. And they shook the hand and they said exactly that quote. "We are not weakened, we are strengthened because we need to take it to our hands to make the world a better place. It's not only up to our leaders and so on. It's starting with little actions."
Tali, how you deal with really the modernity beyond that? In particular, it's a museum of the Holocaust. And there is a very specific, you were born in Israel, you're a child of the Holocaust survivor. And now we're living also in the time where we have such a tragedy in Gaza, but also South Africa has a very specific history with Israel, because Israel was enabler partially of overcoming the sanctions during the genocide. So there is quite a strong bond between the leadership of the South African Republic, ANC, but not just ANC, with the Palestinian struggle. And there is, a very specific attitude. Israel is something else for the South Africans, because it's a country which helped to enable in some way apartheid economy and evade the international solidarity in their fight against apartheid. And these all things collided after the October 7, after the hostages being taken by the Hamas, but also after, the disproportional, let's say, answer of Israel, more modern right-wing Israeli state on the population of Palestine. And then somehow it's brought a crisis to a lot of Holocaust institutions in Europe and in America. I've been really told the stories about some of the Holocaust museums when young generation of the Jews were trying to kind of say, let's do something. We can speak about the attempt of the genocide in Gaza, but the museums of the Holocaust were silent. And they felt there is some level of hypocrisy. So it was also the risk that the trust to such institutions could be broken in particular. So there is a crisis for, you cannot stay away. If the institution, especially the Holocaust in the, part of your name, how you dealt with that in a very specific South African environment?
Very, very complicated, specifically that war in the Middle East, the Gaza-Israel crisis, even more so than Ukraine-Russia in a way in South Africa, even though Ukraine-Russia also is complicated because of the support that many of the anti-apartheid activists felt from the Soviet Union. And actually, I do want to say that I don't want to escape from it. So allow me just to start with that and then go to your very important and very critical, I think, question that we need to speak about museums and reactions and so on. But I think South Africa is a complex place. We're 31 years to our democracy. It is changing, of course. There are issues, of course. We have a lot of issues and lots of crises and, I would say, challenges. And when the war of aggression started in 2022, I think the reaction from South Africa almost surprised me, I must say, because almost not seeing Ukraine as part of that Soviet Union, speaking with nostalgia about the Soviet Union, but separating and then being so pro-Russian, while almost as if no one studied in Kiev, no one, as if ignoring that history. So it's so complicated. I think today it's a little bit better, and there is, with this year, the visit of President Zelensky and now your Prime Minister, there is a little bit more nuance, I feel, in South Africa. And I do want to start with that because I'm speaking I think, to audiences that will be interested in that kind of difficulty around those issues. And those issues are still rising. I also have to deal with those issues, complex issues of Russia, Ukraine. You cannot say one without the other. The issue of the Middle East and other museums. Let me start with other Holocaust museums around the world. There are many Holocaust museums around the world that I think you are very right. There was a crisis. They did not know how to react to the humanitarian crisis, for example. Many of them reacted to the 7th of October, but they did not react further to what was going on after. Of course, we are a museum a historical museum, but our board felt very quickly, within a month, I think, or 6 weeks, that even though we never issue statements, and it's not really a statement, but it is a kind of a opinion piece, did warn already, I think, in November 2023, for the escalation of hate speech, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And of course, about the 7th of October. So since then, so it's now 2 years, we are engaging, and actually every day we are engaging with dialogues with schools, with academics, with everyone. And it was very important for us to stay as an open space where people will be safe. So 2 weeks ago, we hosted Albi Sachs, Judge Albi Sachs, about what is then the future of Gaza, not only Gaza, the West Bank as well, of Palestine and Israel. And we hosted others about how do we talk to each other? How do we combat hate speech, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism? And we are not running away from it. I think that it's very, very important for us as an institute that encourage you to learn from the past to make the connections to today. Until now, I'm not saying that there are people that will not love us to go further than our mission. Of course, there are. But we feel that our mission is to stay as an open space to bring those voices together that do not have a space anymore, because all those spaces are closed. I don't know how it is in Ukraine, but certainly in South Africa, very difficult to find spaces that will encourage people to listen to each other. Palestinians, Israelis, pro, against, and so on, to listen to each other and to try and find a road for a future where we hope that peace will be the common language, not only in your wonderful country, but also in Israel and Palestine.
You hosted also the number of the Ukrainian kind of events. Maybe you'll tell a bit about them, including lately also it happened that currently the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Yulia Sviridenko, she used to be then a Minister of the Finance before when she was speaking, but quite recently she was there at your place. How are those engagements? What actually you also learned from, dealing with us?
As a place of dialogue, as a place of learning from the past, I think it is important for me personally, always welcome delegations. One of the delegations that we had earlier this year in February was the delegation the day after, because those women, wonderful, wonderful Ukrainian women, are trying to say, what can we learn from other experiences? And my network is very wide because I work in Africa and I work in Rwanda, and I had the pleasure to connect them to my colleagues in Rwanda, and they visited Rwanda and learned from Rwanda. Also, in another trip, my friends in Srebrenica and in Sarajevo in Bosnia-Herzegovina, I had the honor to connect them to those colleagues, because Bosnia-Herzegovina can teach us a lot about learning from the past. Not every model will work in Ukraine, but maybe the South African model can be interesting, because the model of negotiations, of talking to each other, even if you are enemies, you are the worst of enemies. You killed each other for 44 years. You can talk to each other. So we had CODESA, of course, and other conferences that brought warring parties together. And then, of course, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So we thought that model can teach quite a lot about it. Also, we are a place where we invite many times media and media engagement, education, educators. So that was important. But finally, of course, to invite your current Prime Minister, because we thought that it would be really interesting to bring art exhibition that tries to deal with starvation, Holodomor, of aggression in the 1930s, before the rise of the Nazis, but with the aggression, of course, of Stalin regime and of the Soviet Union in those early years. And we had an excellent exhibition, art exhibition, an engagement with educating about Holodomor. And we do more of that with the community in Ukraine. Just finally, just to say that what is quite important is how do you look at dictatorships from the past, the one in the Soviet Union, the one in Nazi Germany, but also the case study of Rwanda, of course, which was not a democracy. How do you learn from those case studies about humanity? And that also gives us a lot of power, a lot of strength to deal with you and try to strengthen your resolve to learn from history. And Natalia, finally, I think I spoke to you when we first met about the importance of gathering stories, gathering testimonies. And I think that you have to do that as well. And we continue to do that even now, because those stories will be the human stories that will build our memorials and museums of the future. I encourage you to continue to do that.
You mentioned the Truth Commissions, and I hope sooner or later I'll have kind of a full podcast just about that with people who were involved. But after a recent trip to South Africa, after meeting you, I think I've seen, we had a chance to meet Father Michael Lapsey, quite a legendary figure. He was sent, I'll explain to our audience, that he lost 2 of his limbs because it was already during the process of the negotiations in early 19th when he was sent a letter bomb by the apartheid regime inside kind of 2 religious magazines. So he lost both hands. He has a foundation of the healing. But you know, what was for me interesting during the last trip, which was not my first, that we all were for this kind of way how the Ukrainians can find the common ground with the South Africans. I think what I understood was missing, that we're speaking on the different stages. You know, we are always asked the questions about like whether you will talk to the Russians, how you will talk. And there is no challenge for us, you know, maybe for somebody is, but we are in a different stage. What I understood after meeting so many people who fought apartheid and who participated in all kind of the institutions, that you're always speaking about still after. And we are still in the stage where the apartheid regime was forced by the international sanctions, by inner pressure, to accept its defeat. We are now pushed in the situation, let's say, and it was not pushed to the situation that there would be debates like, oh, whether we preserve apartheid in part of the country, you know, let's say, let's preserve apartheid in Cape Town, and then the rest of the country would be given to the Black community, you know, or what the conditions of the preservation of the apartheid regime. And we are discussed today, we are pushed to this discussion, like how we can preserve part of the Russian occupation and like coexist with something which to our extent shouldn't be there. I'm not speaking about the state of Russia, but speaking about a particular specific regime. And what was very interesting also from the book of Father Lapsey, which I read later, that he was saying that the hardest was not really push the Black Africans to forgive, but actually to the part of the white South Africans to admit that they bear a bit of the responsibility. So the Black community was sometimes ready to come and say, forgive, but come to our meetings. But some of the white were saying like, it's not about us. It wasn't exactly me. It was the regime. And I do think that if you get into these details, it's becoming fascinating to understand the complexity and like this, there is a lot of things we can discuss and deal, and there is a lot we can learn from the Truth Commissions. Yet I'll have a very different questions for the ending. It's more like how South Africa dealt with its past beyond that, and I'm speaking specifically about the museum. We were fascinated with my South Korean friend while being there that, oh, some of the museum is financed by the casino. Another one is financed by that model. It's not really the state museum. How it's going on? What are actually the interesting examples from South Africa really to preserve this history? And like to, with a limited amount of money, with a limited amount of the resources, because it's definitely not fully perfect, but there are amazing other great museums in Johannesburg, just near your place.
Reconciliation is a process. It's not a magic wand. We wish that there was a magic wand that we can, just touch and everyone forgive and we are kumbaya and we are living together and sing a song and everything is all right. So it is a process. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was not perfect. And I believe that we still have to go through the process, and specifically the white population of South Africa, more so than anyone else. What we did here at the museum was to create last year, for the 30th anniversary of Rwanda genocide, of the 30th anniversary of democracy in South Africa, but also this year, the 30th anniversary of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Srebrenica, the genocide day. We created a wonderful exhibition that is called the 1990s Years of Transition. South Africa, Rwanda, Bosnia-Herzegovina. The exhibition, by the way, just opened at the University of Sarajevo to mark the 30th anniversary about 2-3 weeks ago. It is looking at before, during the conflict, the justice after, so is it DRC, Dayton Accord, Gacaca, and so on. And how do you deal with it now? How do you educate about it? What does peace education look like? How society is dealing with the past? Because we really thought that, first of all, the multi-directional approach, looking at history side by side, is important and needs to be done more because we can empower each other. And what is happening in South Africa, just to end, and you mentioned the casino, and I'm sure that it's so interesting and so strange for our listeners. Apartheid Museum that was born in 1993, 1994, so around in 1995-6 it opened. Apartheid Museum is actually financed by a casino, Gold Reef City Casino. Apartheid Museum is an excellent museum that tells the story of apartheid. But it's a large museum, it's an expensive museum with wonderful exhibitions inside, permanent exhibition about Nelson Mandela, exhibition about Archbishop Tutu. Wonderful, wonderful place that is basically financed by casino. Why? Because in 1994, in order to build the casino, you had to give back to society. And to give back to society, you had to either maybe build a conference center, or maybe a hotel, or maybe a museum. And the Apartheid Museum was born. But it does amazing stuff. It teaches thousands of kids. Many visitors are visiting the Apartheid Museum. Our model was slightly different. There are, by the way, in the city, you have Constitution Hill, wonderful museum, and that is a museum in the city. You have country museums that arts and culture, in the country is looking after. That is Lily's Leaf Farm, for example, a country museum. Our museum is a partnership museum. I fully believe in partnership. And it's a partnership between the city of Johannesburg and an NGO, non-for-profit. And our model was talk to everyone, bring everyone together, work, build something that is actually not expensive to build and not expensive to run, and work with everyone. So work with embassies, work with corporates, work with banks, work with individuals, and work with friends that believe that we need to talk to each other. There is no shortcuts. If we don't do it, we are not going to get to being happily ever after, as we hope, of course, to be.
To really finalize the discussion, I do request a bit of your advice for those people who in Ukraine, and there are so many of them, are now considering building a physical space all over the country. In generally, I believe it won't be not one place, there would be many. But, maybe like the easiest hint, because, the detail I remember very well about what you showed me saying like, look, this is the room where we speak about the resistance during the Second World War. And we have the tables. And actually, it's a usual nice, but kitchen tables we bought. We didn't order them. They're kind of cheaper. But the shelves, they're a bit resilient. It's hard to pull them out. So when you're in the room about resistance, you have the shelf which resists a bit to you. Like there are some tiny details, but it's an ordinary kitchen table. And there were hints like that. But in generally, can you give this, based on that, maybe a couple of very practical ideas for those groups of people, many of them who are thinkers, who are young activists, who are young historians, or maybe who are now thinking how we preserve the memory of the Russian invasion, and they're puzzled and they think, oh, it costs money, but where do you start? What do you need to have in mind? And maybe somebody would listen. I'll definitely do.
First of all, talk to each other. Don't live in isolation. Talk to each other. And if you can, your strength is by working together. So don't try to create 2,000 museums, rather create 200 museums, but even those 200 work together. Maybe create an association, talk to each other, meet 3 times a year, exchange ideas, exchange content even. Number 2, you don't have to go the most expensive. Work with people, go to them and say, can you give me a kitchen table that I will paint gray? And then when I open the drawers, they will resist, like in the case of what you said. We spoke to all communities. We went to the scrapyard to ask for metal. We went to the glass people to ask for windows. We're not shy to go and say, listen, we do not have money. You don't have to give us money. Please give us something. What can you give us? And that was amazing, amazing. I have stories. I can write a book about the wheelbarrows that came. I can't give you anything but the wheelbarrow. Can you use the wheelbarrow? Yes, the bricks. I can put the bricks in the wheelbarrow and they can run with the bricks. These are the best tips that I can tell you. Don't think expense. Think, how can I do it with as little money as possible, together as a community, because the strength is for us together. And the last thing, people are your best currency. Interview them, get them to give you photographs, documents, other things, other stories. Maybe they don't want to give you the original one, that's fine. You can do everything with a phone. With a phone, you can get audio of testimonies. With the phone, you can do so much more. Do it. Start collecting your own archive. That is a tidbit of what you can do. And of course, come to Johannesburg and I will be so happy to help with whatever I can.